welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast.
It's great to have you.
Yeah. For anyone who might not know who you are, Dale, it's very few amount of people out there in the world. Hey, could you give an introduction? This is Dale.
Yeah. So I am a consultant now, 30 years in executive level business management, specifically on operations side. Last 5 years, I've really been focusing in on what for me personally was a bit of a deficit, and that was my leadership skills. So for the last 5 years, I've really focused in on, for me personally, how to be a better leader. And now as a consultant, I am helping others learn how to be better leaders as well. So yeah, I've got experience with Intel, Toshiba America, Gateway Computers, as some of the smaller companies, and then also I've worked with privately held companies. The last company I worked at, OmniDuct here in Orange County, I was their vice president of operations, and so lots of experience with operations, and now focusing a bit on the leadership side of things.
Well, that's great. And I noticed that you're part of the Townsend leadership group or program, or how's that connected with what you do? And I think John Townsend's work is fabulous.
Yeah. So I am partnered with the Townsend Leadership Group, and it's one of the many things that Dr. Townsend's got going, but it is focused on the leadership side of business. And if I were to kind of break it down, if you just break down any business, a business is just a collection of processes being managed by a collection of people. And those two entities come together in a company, and you might have the best processes ever invented, but if the people side of management of that process doesn't hone well together and does not mesh well together, then you don't have a successful company, and vice versa, by the way. So with the Townsend Leadership Group, I'm just really focused on helping leadership as well as their teams come to understand that they have just as much impact, if not more impact, on the success of a company than their processes. We're kind of taught to focus on process and manage and tactics and all of the stuff to deliver goods and services to our customers. But in reality, it's really the people that make it happen. And so I'm just really, for the last 5 years, I've just been fascinated with how people interact as well as grow and become better versions of themselves. So that's why I kind of say that, I help businesses grow from the inside out, or build business from the inside out, is because I can work on the operational side of things through lean and continuous improvement. But with my training in the Townsend Leadership Group, I can help leaders and organizations as well.
Well, I'm kind of curious, Dale. I mean, you're obviously a seasoned veteran here with leadership in various companies, and you must have some good stories of like before and after, or maybe just the before because they never got to the after. But
yeah.
as we continue to talk through the podcast, whether you want to start now or whether you want to start later, I'd be really interested in any examples that you want to put forth. How we got connected was with John Pearson.
Yeah.
And John's awesome, but he's on a board of directors. I think it's, the Christian Credit Union or something like that?
Christian Community Credit Union, yes.
Yeah. And he said you came in, and it takes a lot to impress John. And he said you just did an awesome job with the group.
Well, that's great to hear. John is very complimentary, and whether it's the credit union or any other company that I've worked with, it's really the same story, guys. It's not, nothing new under the sun, but it's, people are driven to be successful themselves as well as their companies. And whether it's a company owner or an executive or even the person that is the face-to-face to the customer, they're all just trying to do their best. And sometimes doing our best, but doing it individually causes processes to slow down and things to slow down. And so I just kind of focus folks to break through those stalemates sometime, break through some of their own individual roadblocks, because many times people will not be effective because they're not secure in themselves. And so, I can help individuals kind of work through that and become stronger leaders as well as more productive and confident. So I don't, to be totally transparent, I don't want to get into specifics, especially with current clients. So, I think if I think back to my history, a long time ago when I was working at companies like Toshiba, and working with two different business cultures, I mean, boy, that was quite an interesting season for me, where you've got the Japanese business culture, and of course, this was back in the 80s and early 2000s. I'm sorry, the 90s and the early 2000s, where very autocratic. The Japanese style was highly driven, very process orientated, and that seemed to be the priority. Was make the processes clean, and we're here to make money, and that's the only thing that matters. And so I saw a lot of people just get ran over by that Japanese culture. For the Japanese, this was just normal and it was expected. But here, trying to implement that in American business culture was quite. There's no other word about it. It's in some cases it was damaging, and so. I can tell you one specific story. I planned a vacation, 2-week vacation. I was going camping with some families. My family was going camping with some families. I booked it 3 months in advance, and the Friday before I was leaving, my boss told me, "No, you can't go." And in that culture, that's the way it was. And so I even tried to push back and said, well, then you need to pay for all of the fees that I spent to reserve and all of that. And they wouldn't do that. And so the bottom line was that was my exposure to what it looks like when leadership is not that concerned about their team. And it was just simply about you needed to follow the rules and follow the process, and everything else was to be sacrificed. And so stepping out of that, I spent 14 years
excuse me, Dale, did you ever find out the reason that, out of the blue, they kind of just...
Yeah, I know exactly, because he told me. He decided to go on vacation, and he needed me to stay back to watch the shop while he went on vacation.
So how long after that did you start looking to work for another company?
Actually, that's kind of funny because went through a whole lot of gyration about what should I do, and in the end, what I did, through a lot of coaching from our HR, was to record, document a grievance, if you will, so that it could be on record. And as soon as he got back, I through HR's insistence, they gave me time, 2 weeks off. But of course, by that time, the vacation with camping with our friends and family had already passed.
Yeah.
So my wife and I and kids, I think, what did we do? I'm trying to remember now. I think we just went on a road trip just to get away.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and that was really my introduction to this whole level of leadership that can have a negative impact to the team, because I wasn't that greatly loyal. They paid well, the benefits were awesome. I had a growing family. My family thrived. My kids were able to go to private school and things like that. But I was a dedicated employee, but I can't say that I'd go back today. So those types of experiences really taught me that leadership and I would say people-centric leadership, to be more specific, is the strategy that really helps companies become successful. And I think we're seeing that more and more. In fact, today, top of the business headlines is the Business Roundtable came out and said that they've rechanged their statement on what's the number one key thing in business. Up until this point, it's been stakeholder profit. And now they're saying it's much more than that. It's all stakeholders, including employees and investing employees and things like that. So we're seeing that old autocratic type of culture starting to fade away, and it can't come fast enough, in my opinion.
I'm kind of curious, Dale. I mean, you make the statement that lean's not a manufacturing discipline anymore.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, it's just not. It was developed absolutely in manufacturing through the Toyota production system. But if you boil the whole concept down of eliminating waste out of everything that you do, then you're going to have a profitable organization. And back to my thing about, any business is a collection of processes and a collection of people managing the processes. You can have all of this focus on lean on the process side, but a process can be found in accounts payable. It can be found in, of course, manufacturing. It can be found in how you process a sales order. One of my clients recently was Edwards Life Sciences in Irvine, and they asked me to come in and help them implement some lean technology, or not technology, but philosophy in their launching of new products in marketing. So never stepped a foot in the manufacturing world, but spent all my time in the marketing office helping them plot out a more efficient way of launching their products. And we calculated that we probably are saving them at least a month, if not more, in time saved in launching their products. So I do not see this thing called lean and continuous improvement as something that's just in the shop. It's enterprise wide. It's everywhere. And you just need to look at everything that you do in a process mindset, and you'll be able to find the wastes all over the place.
And you think this translates directly into leadership? I mean, not just not just marketing processes or everyday operations, but into the very leadership tactics that are practiced by executives and business owners?
Yeah. So if you look at the traditional way that lean is looked at, there's 8 identified wastes in any process. And I use the acronym TIMWOOD and U, the letter U. And so that really quickly, that's transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, overproduction, overprocessing, defects, rework. And then U is the unutilized potential of team members. And so when you look at any process, you can see that. And one of the things that I'm realizing, especially in my last 5 years or so, I'm really seeing a lot of wasteful things in how people do leadership. And I'm sure there's more that I haven't identified yet, but I've come up with 5 so far. And playing with the Timwood and U acronym, I've come up with Jim and U. So very quickly, judgment. If your leadership style is high in judgment, you're literally limiting your team's ability to thrive and to be innovative. I is for isolation. A lot of leaders, especially at the higher levels, executive levels, feel almost obligated that they're not connecting with their team at a personal level. It's all business and business only. And all the studies show that great leaders have an ability to be personable and being connected to their teams and not isolated. So isolation to me is a waste. Mistrust.
Dale, real quick.
Yeah.
On the first letter J, you said judgments.
Yeah.
Business leaders are too judgmental. What would be the opposite of that?
Well, that would be finding the good in others and being for the other, whether it be individually or as a team. And yeah, there's always situations where you're going to have to be a critic, if you will, if something were to not go the way that it was planned. But you can, even in those scenarios, you can be for the person just having to correct behavior in some way. You can still be for the person. So that's how you build loyalty. That's how you build productive teams and productive employees, is by giving them the sense that they are worth, that they are worthy of being part of your team. And when you're doing the judgment thing, and always, making the others feel like, they're just not good enough. Hey, I just made this $14 billion sale. Yeah, it should have been 20 billion. That's when you're creating a negative response instead of a positive response. So that's the idea behind judgment. And then with isolation, just keeping back, not being connected, not trying to stay connected with the team. And, in all transparency, that was what I was taught in the Japanese culture. And I had to break through that and become more connected with my team. And that's simply just done by making a point of being with your team members more. And inside work, it can be a team meeting, it can be team building. There's all sorts of ways of doing that. And then every so often, it's okay to go out and get a beer after work or whatever, just to keep that connection strong and viable. So That's the idea behind eliminating isolation. And then mistrust. There's all sorts of ways that you can build mistrust, but the bottom line is just making the other person feel that that they are on the cusp of something bad. So it can be, you've got personal agendas that you are following through on. You're not speaking the truth. You're doing stuff to undermine relationships, and that could be gossip, lies, purposeful setting up for failure, things like that. So you want to obviously stay away from mistrust, and you want to build trust. And if you're connected, if you're for the other person, if you're transparent, and authenticity is the new key thing here, being vulnerable, all of these things build the trust for your team and for the individuals on your team. What did I say? JIM. Oh, and N. So it's Jim and you, not and you. Is no growth. In other words, if your environment keeps people from growing on an individual basis, you've got a stagnant culture. And so again, going back to this article that I read this morning about the new statement from the business roundtable, they're saying that you've got to invest in your workers and help them continue to grow and be developing all the time. To me, that's just part of continuous improvement, whether it's a process orientated or a personal process of growth. I'm always looking to be a little bit better every day is a common phrase that I use. And whether it's a process or me individually, I'm trying to get a little bit better every day.
So I'm curious, Dale, do you have something you've seen with a client where they're doing an exceptional job in that area, and what does that look like?
For development?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we did at OmniDuct, which I thought was just a great thing, is that we had daily meetings, and those daily meetings spent some time with some type of development, and it ranged. We tried to keep it as fresh as possible. This could be we did a series on U.S. history and using videos for U.S. history, and tried to find the latest and greatest versions of history. We did economics. We did the Constitution. We just did all sorts of things, and the whole idea was just helping the whole team get a little bit better every day. And then from an individual standpoint, if somebody was interested in some type of training, we were 100% behind that, and the company would, if not pay 100% all the time, but would pay a portion of it depending upon what it was. And so there was this constant focus on helping individuals grow a little bit better in the way that they wanted to grow. And what we saw was, as you would probably expect, we saw folks that were much more engaged in what we were doing from a lean and continuous improvement standpoint, but also in their work, being more innovative in how to make improvements, and also promotions and moving people based upon their interests to new roles and responsibilities and things like that. So without that focus, the culture would have been much more stagnant without it. So that's a good example of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's great. Thanks.
Yeah. The last thing on the leadership wastes is something I called underutilized leadership potential. And the idea behind that is if you're having, as a leader, if you're having to deal with all the fallout of all the other wastes, the isolation, the judgment, the mistrust, that you can't be a better leader because you're dealing with all of the junk, all of the fallout. And so the more you can work on eliminating these wastes in leadership, the more potential you have as becoming a stronger leader. And so that's the idea behind it. And the Townsend model of personal growth is what I use to help individuals as well as teams break those wasteful things in leadership.
So can you give me an example of one of those wasteful things that you've broken with a client? You don't have to name the client, but I'm just kind of curious to give people a visual here, at least a verbal visual.
Yeah. So I'll just say it. There was a team, and the leader was just not connecting well with the group, and there was a lot of discord in the team, and they got stuff done, but it just did not seem like it was a major improvements and major wins. And this was several years ago, and I'll just say it's a company that I worked for many years ago, and so we went through this process of working through what was the challenges with the team, and it came out in the team that the leader just was rude. There's no other way of saying it. Fortunately, he was rude to everybody, not just to individuals, but to everybody. And so his boss had the foresight of bringing in an expert that helped identify what those issues were, and then I participated. This is actually before my Townsend work, but I was asked to come in and step in alongside him and kind of coach him through some of the changes that he had to go through. And one of them that I specifically worked on with him was trying to find out why he was feeling like he needed to be rude. And it was simply the fact that he was never taught to be polite, and there was family of origin things that caused him to be very blunt. And he thought that was what you needed to be as a leader in business. And so with some coaching and with practice, it's really just practice, I did a lot of role play with him, just to say, okay, what would you say if you didn't want to be so rude? What would you say in this particular case to this person? And so within a few months, things started to change. And that was to the point where he came off of his action plan, and that he was able to continue to lead his group. And that was one of the first times that I actually saw the power of making a difference in leadership, because what we saw was the department that he was running became very productive in delivering the products that they were supposed to be delivering. In this particular case, it was more about delivering some accessories to another department in the company. And all of a sudden, they were hitting their deadlines. And in fact, they became quite a key leader in the process of delivering the products. And so that whole idea behind having a leader be more connected to the group really made a big impact on me.
So the good news was he was consistent and you knew what to expect. The bad news was he was always rude.
He's always rude.
And then the good news was he was willing to change.
That's probably the biggest thing. Is that well, when you're put on an action plan, it's basically saying if you don't improve, we'll have to say goodbye. And so I think that was his first level of motivation was well, I don't want to lose my job. But as he started making some changes and saw the team respond to him in a positive way, I think that really changed his heart. And it took him a few months, but eventually he turned it around, and that was quite an interesting time for me to just kind of help coach him through that.
Dale, do you feel like you're a therapist or a psychologist?
Well, technically, no. I'm not a psychologist.
No, not technically, but just.
but definitely, having knowledge in psychology is, when you're dealing with humans, is probably a good thing. And the Townsend Leadership Program that I went through for 3 years, while it wasn't therapy, it wasn't clinical or anything like that, it really does help you focus in on what's causing you to react the way that you react. If for example, you're dealing with anger, there's something inside of you that's causing that anger, and there's ways of exploring with that person without having to get into therapy and things like that. And there's sometimes, frankly, that I've had to, refer people to other experts, clinical psychologists and folks like that, because it's beyond my expertise and my understanding. So, but in general, most of what I have seen so far in the deficit in when it comes to leadership are manageable just by making people aware of what's going on inside. I like to say, in fact, most of my clients will giggle if they were to hear this, is I just try to keep everybody in reality. If we can keep everybody in reality of what's going on right now, most of us can work through what's causing the issues in the first place. We just need a dose of reality. So,
well, if they're open to it.
If they're open to it, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds right up our alley.
Yeah, I mean, I've found that with my clients also that, you can, it's kind of like parenting, you're doing adult daycare, and you can give some verbal warnings, you can give some verbal encouragement, but, you can stay nice, but you have to have a firm boundary. So then you have to move to a write-up, and if the write-up doesn't work, you got to move to a performance improvement plan. And there's just some people that don't get it until they see it in writing and have to sign it.
Yeah.
And it's it's like flipping the switch.
Yeah.
Until then, they're just fighting and denial. But something about signing their name to something that they're aware of, if you're going to have any chance at all with the person who's in denial, that can flip the switch.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've also seen, and this is more recently, while I've, in the last 5 years, some of the most dug in uh, stubborn people loosen up and become highly connected with me simply because I try to be vulnerable and connecting to them. And it's there is something about people being real with each other, even in business environments. I know there's going to be people that are going to freak out when they hear that. It's like, what? Business is business, and I don't want to have friendships, and I don't want to have business relationships being mixed with personal relationships and stuff like that. And I get that, and I understand that. Not everybody can be your best friend at work, but you've got, even if they're not your best friend, or even if they're not friends, you got to have a good working relationship with them, and that means being real, being to a certain extent vulnerable. If a leader says to a group, wow, that loss that we just had, that sucks, man, and I've lost some sleep over that. Is there something we can do to make sure that that we all don't lose sleep again? That's much more resonating than that leader getting up and ranting and raving about how bad of a performance the team did, and browbeating them and insulting them or being rude or whatever, right? So there is definitely a benefit in being a people-centric leader, and being I like to use the term servant leader, where I'm serving my team, and that's how you get long-standing, loyal, productive people to be part of your team.
Well, that sounds, yeah. I mean, that sounds like a good place maybe to wrap up. But I'm kind of curious. I know you do some pretty like 12-month programs or something like that with clients. Did you want to explain what you do with people?
Yeah. Well, thanks, David. I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. So the Townsend Leadership Program is developed by Dr. John Townsend. It's a 12-month program for leaders, and it is a meeting once a month. It's like a mastermind. It's not. It is a mastermind concept. So you might think of Vistage or C12 or Convene, where it's business focused. But with the Townsend Leadership Program, it's 100% focused on leadership, and it's 100% focused on the individual, on how they can become better leaders. So we don't get into the tactical side of how to improve sales, or the tactical side of building a better widget. But we do get into, how do you increase sales by being a better leader? How do you increase sales, or how do you deliver a better widget by being a better leader? And it's all focused on the individual. Some of the stuff I've already talked about, looking at what causes you to do certain things that are unproductive. We get into that. And John has content that he's training on. And every time we get together, there's a time spent watching training videos from John, specifically targeting the TLP members. And then we go through a whole bunch of things like homework, work groups, so where the members can present to the team whatever issue they'd like to talk about. So they may talk about, here's my idea on increasing sales. What do you guys think? So there is some of that, but John's training is really focused on making the individual a better leader in the long haul. So, and that actually, I'm starting that in October, and we've already got some folks, executives signed up for that, and we've got some extra seats. So if anybody's interested, they can contact me through LinkedIn and get the info on that.
Great. Dale Hedges, thanks so much for joining us for the podcast today. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience before we sign off?
No, thanks again for the opportunity, and really appreciate the time spending with you guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dale. We enjoyed it.